Hitman with Glen Powell and Adria Arjona has been making a lot of waves since it first hit the festival circuit, thanks to the dynamic performance by Powell and then the dark comedic storyline. It's now been in limited release in theaters, but is also arriving on Netflix. So is all the hype right? Inspired by an unbelievable true story, a straight-laced professor discovers his hidden talent as a fake hitman. He meets his match in a client who steals his heart and ignites a powder keg of deception, delight, and mixed-up identities. So Powell co-wrote this with director Richard Linklater and stars as Gary, his college professor who leads a fairly boring and uneventful existence. He moonlights for the police by helping to record audio and video in sting operations in murder-for-hire cases. Now, when the undercover detective is unable to do a meeting with the suspect, Gary steps in and then discovers he has a knack for it. Now, in some senses, this has a bit of a noir feeling to it. We have a detective, sorts, and he works various cases and narrates portion of his thoughts and escapades for us as the audience so that we can know him better. There's also a femme fatale as well as a female love interest, providing the necessary risk and passion to the story. Now, this isn't presented in black and white, nor is it steeped in shadows, but the tone certainly draws inspiration from film noir. Now, Powell is excellent in his role. He's got charm to spare, and the way that he dives into this character with full abandon, it was just pure joy. As part of his shtick when appearing as a fake hitman for the sting operations, Gary dresses the part, but each differently based on what he believes the suspect is looking for. This allows Powell to craft all sorts of memorable character creations, one of which was completely unexpected and made me cackle out loud. I love how Powell makes the character of Gary believable in both of the roles. As the meek and awkward professor, there's sadness and loneliness, even though he is a nice character. He's just unremarkable and forgettable as a person. And then there's Ray, his pseudo-killer sting persona. He exudes confidence, fierce decisiveness, and power. Now, the two are such polar opposites that it can feel like we're watching Buddy Love and Professor Clump turn into each other in the blink of an eye. The themes of discovering one's true self, or whether or not the ability to reinvent oneself is possible, are consistently reinforced thanks to lectures that we get from Gary as a philosophy professor. Now, the questions he raises with his students, they help to foreshadow later events, but also to connect the dots with the transformation that we're watching in his personality and actions. And this is all a wonderful thing to watch, because, as is probably expected, complications arise when Ray meets Maddie, played by Arjona. Now, he makes some choices that can jeopardize the case, creating a spiraling effect of suspicion, mishaps, and fateful decisions. Arjona is just as charismatic as Powell, and they have a believably tension-filled romantic pull towards each other. Now, the internal struggles that Gary/Ray have, they're engaging, but also fun. The emotional exchanges, they feel genuine, but there's always this air of slight dread and mystery with their interactions. Now, I thought the story would turn out one way, but I was pretty much wrong. Still, though, enjoying the progression. Now, while there is some dark comedy interwoven through the narrative, the main focus of this becomes a romance with some stressful thrills. There's barely any action, which was a little surprising for a movie about assassins, whether real or imagined. But in reality, extreme action, even big chase scenes, they wouldn't fit within this type of storytelling. This is very character-driven, relying on Powell to suck us in effectively and make us want a romantic outcome to succeed with Arjona. We can instantly feel the draw between the two characters, and because of their witty interactions, they quickly become people that we want to see as a couple, but also a couple we fear for what their future might hold. Now, the movie's just shy of 2 hours. For the most part, I didn't notice the time. There were some moments, though, when the story was inserting unnecessary vignettes, which I think can be entertaining, but weren't entirely necessary. Now, for example, we get to see a few different sting operations that are a mixture of cringe and hilarious. But once we meet Maddie and she and Gary/Ray kind of hit things off, we see one or two more stings take place. And I understand that Gary's gig didn't just end when he met Maddie, but also to go back to these setups didn't really need to happen, even though I was thoroughly enjoying the different characters that Gary came up with. Now, we have some supporting characters in this that are also fun to watch, like Retta, Sanjay Rao, and Austin Emilio. Retta and Rao, they get to include a lot of snarky and sarcastic wit, just sharing this dynamic that feels lived in and genuine, but also not so over the top to not be believable. Emilio is kind of the mixed bag character. He's a detective who works on the stings, but he's also mostly a slimeball. He's not meant to be very likable, even though he does have moments that make you feel kind of positive towards him. The three, plus Powell, all create an awkward, sometimes tense, but mostly supportive team that then works to make all of the operations feel complete, rather than just seeing Powell as a lone wolf meeting with a suspect. Now, for me, the film was enjoyable and it was entertaining. Held my attention, made me laugh, invested me in the characters to a degree that I was concerned for their outcomes, and also hit all the romantic notes that build a believable relationship that I want to see succeed. Outside of one scene, I don't think I laughed out loud, but I was still amused. And for as charming as both Powell and Arjona are individually and then together, this isn't a movie that I would drop everything to revisit over and over again. I'm certainly going to put it on again and get sucked into all the various personas that Powell displays and enjoying them just all for their individual quirks and stereotypes, but I don't get the hype that was generated from all of the festivals. A lot of that, I think, has to do with the formulaic nature of the plot. It's not something we've never seen before, which isn't always a bad thing, but it does follow predictable progressions, even if specific outcomes might be surprising. We know that eventually boy will meet girl. There will be a connection, possible romance. Then a complication will arise that makes them question the relationship. There will also be personal complexities to add dimension while moving towards a mostly obvious conclusion. And that doesn't mean it's not satisfying as a story or a watch. Just know that for the most part, the only thing truly surprising in this are the characters that Gary embodies for his stings. So overall, Hitman is a satisfying romance, using slightly dark comedy to propel this based-on-true events tale forward. Glen Powell displays his innate charisma to craft endearing and funny personas that keep you wanting more, with one being an absolute riot. Adria Arjona is a wonderful counterpart to Powell, creating a character who is sympathetic and slightly scary all at once. Their chemistry is palpable and energetic, adding to the narrative in memorable ways. Some of the repetition begins to feel tiresome, but the thematic reinforcements strewn throughout the storyline and the noir aesthetics work to keep this from becoming just another forgettable romance. The overall plot is formulaic and predictable, but the cheekiness and the sweetness of the story craft character bonds that are going to put a smile on your face and may just have you looking for your own hitman. There's sex, maybe some very brief nudity, a lot of profanity, and barely any violence, which is surprising given the context of the story. I give Hitman 3.5 out of 5 couches. So what are you binging right now? Anything great that I should add to my list? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.